Oh, it's Thursday, April 10th, 2025, and I'll be reading again from the United Church of Christ, a daily devotional, and sharing my own thoughts and ideas and impressions as I read it, not necessarily strictly from a Christian perspective, but using them as a basis for discussion on how we live in this world and care for one another and care for creation. So I hope you listen, regardless of whatever your feeling is about a divine being or Jesus or whatever. Listen and see how some of the things, impressions I have, or what the devotion brings to your mind about our life together today. So the devotion for today is entitled "A Love That Lasts," written by Ellis Miller, and Ellis bases the devotion upon Psalm 118, verse 4 from the Common English Bible. Let those who honor the Lord say it. God's faithful love lasts forever. And then Ellis writes, do you remember the popular 1980s children's book, You Love Forever? It traces a mother's love for her son through the lullaby refrain she sings to him throughout his life as she cradles him in her arms. It's a tearjerker for every new parent or any child that grew up hearing that same lullaby whispered, but it also has become a point of awkwardness and ridicule. A mother climbing a ladder into her grown son's room while he sleeps? Is that love or is that trespassing? 30 years later, a new writer updated the book with an ending that incorporated some healthy boundaries between mother and son. The hope was to mold the eye rolling elements into a story that allowed readers to stay focused on the love. In this rewrite, the original book has found renewed life and is being shared as a language of parental love for a new generation. It's not just children's books that call for new images and metaphors, for shifts in how our stories are told or who is telling them, and for adapted language to allow us to understand the message without getting stuck in a mucky part. The particularities of our sacred stories in scripture, hymns, and liturgy can sometimes cause us to stumble, step back, and miss the overarching message they hope to convey. When contexts change, so must the stories we tell in order to equip us to first perceive and then proclaim God's love in our lives. The details might bend and shift, but God's love will last forever. And Ellis's prayer, may we find God's love in the center of our stories and in the heart of our traditions. Well, a couple things that came to mind as I read this is that, yes, context is everything, and understanding context, even when you're reading something like the Bible or the Quran, understanding the context of when the story was written, to whom it was written, and why it was written, and what the culture was like at the time, because they are products of human beings, and I know some Muslims believe that um, the Quran was in Arabic was directly quoted from the archangel. Excuse me, I can't remember which angel it was. I'm sorry, Gabriel dictated the words of the Quran to Muhammad. Um, I'm not sure every Muslim believes that, and some people believe that the Bible was in the same way. It was dictated to the writers of the various stories, and or the people who consolidated them into what became the canon in the Bible, and or those who interpret it into different languages. God guides all of their language, which is a stretch because some people don't believe certain interpretations of the Bible are as legitimate as others, and they're all human products. Anyway, I'm diverging on that. But one of the things that this devotion made me think of is some of the hymns when I was leading a church, and I was responsible for selecting hymns. I tended not to select hymns that talked about Jesus had to spill his blood for God and those kinds of images, because I couldn't get past what those words brought to my mind to see what other message might be in there. And frankly, some of the theology behind them just doesn't ring true to my understanding of who Jesus was, um, and what he tried to do while he was here, and who he may or may not be in whoever's eyes. I struggled with those hymns, and so I didn't pick those. And I know some of them were favorites of the elderly people in my church because it's what they grew up with. But didn't think that they are relevant to Christianity today. And then others, even written back in the 1700s, elements of them still seem to ring true today. The other thing I was thinking about is what does God's love really mean, especially if you're not a believer in believing that there is a divine being. Some of my thoughts are today that the divinity, or whatever you may call God, exists in our interconnectedness. And it's truly when we consider ourselves part of creation and part of a community that we embody God's love, if you will. And if we really have empathy and care for one another, and care for creation, then in fact that is what and how God's love lasts forever. Which is why I didn't really understand this whole thing against empathy, especially that being touted by Christians, because their view of God is completely different than any view that I have had or may still hold. Anyway, those are my thoughts on this devotion. I really do think that, especially in these times, that it is understanding our connectedness, our interconnectedness, our mutuality, and having empathy for one another and helping one another and pooling our resources together, our gifts, if you will, together to make this world a better place, to help it become the place, if you will, that God meant it to be or created it to be. I don't know. Those are just some thoughts just swirling in my head as I was reading this, and I hope it brings you some thoughts and ideas of how to gather together and gather people around you and find the support and the love you need to get through whatever you may be going through in your life.